What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. It's game week 33 preview time today. Still lots of matches to come this week, but not too much time to choose our FPL squads for game week 33, given the quick turnarounds once the games are finished. And I put out a request for questions and stuff on Twitter and on YouTube, and you came back to me with quite a few. So there's lots to get through. Let's jump into it. So some of the questions that came in were revolving around questions we answered in game week 32. That's not to say that we can't answer them again, but in some cases, the information we have hasn't really changed. So I'm still going to go through them because they were asked quite a lot, but I'm not necessarily going to spend too long on them. So first one up is selling Liverpool players. And this, I think, is going to be a question we're going to see from now until the end of the season. The title is won. As soon as we see the first bit of rotation, people are really going to worry. I look at the fixtures for Liverpool players and think, when am I going to want to captain a Liverpool player? When do I think they are the most outstanding pick or the top of the pile in terms of captaincy choices? So let's just quickly go through the fixtures now. Villa at home, extremely good fixture in game week 33. Probably Liverpool's best fixture left, to be honest. If you're not worried about rotation, Trent, Mane, Salah look really good captain picks for game week 33, which we're going to come on to later. Brighton away, Burnley at home. They're pretty good fixtures. We saw Brighton away. We saw Man United do pretty well against them last night. So that was a pretty good result there, and you'd expect Liverpool to be able to do something similar, unless, of course, they do rotate a lot of their players, in which case I do think they suffer from a similar thing to Man United, that when they start rotating, they don't perform as well, which you'd expect from most clubs anyway. And I'm not saying it's the same for Liverpool as it is for Man United, but it's certainly not to the levels of, obviously, Man City. When they rotate, their team is so good, they almost perform just as well when they change most of their 11. Burnley at home. Could be a good-ish fixture given it's at home, but Nick Pope and Burnley have defended quite well. Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle after that. So for me, when I think about keeping these really expensive players, and you don't have to captain them to have them in your team, don't get me wrong, but you want to at least have a few times when you want to captain them. So over the next three, Villa, Brighton, Burnley, arguably you could leave the captain on a Liverpool player. Trent, Salah, Mane, whoever it might be, really good options. But I do think there's other options for those game weeks outside of maybe game week 33, where Villa does look like quite a good fixture. In game week 34 and 35, Man City and Man United also have good options. So if you're happy to captain the likes of De Bruyne or Mahrez or Fernandes or Martial or Rashford or Greenwood or whoever it might be, maybe you don't need that much money in your midfield. I still think, for me, I would absolutely keep Trent. No reason to sell him. If he does miss out, my hope would be that he just doesn't play at all, in which case you have a sub-defender come on. So as long as your sub-bench is fine, then that's absolutely good. But he's such a cheap price. His points per match are not that far off the attackers either. I just think I would want him. And to be honest, if you told me you were going to captain him ahead of Salah or Mane of the next three, I probably wouldn't say too much about it. I think that's probably quite a good idea. So for me, I won't be selling the two I have, Trent and Salah, mostly because I want to see what happens with the rotation first, and I'm pretty happy with the rest of my team with them in it. Now, at some point, if I need a bit of money, I probably will look to sell Salah. Yes, it's a risky move, given how good he can be, but he eats up a lot of the budget. I'm probably not going to captain him after Aston Villa for the rest of the season, so perhaps he could go. But for now, let's see what happens in the Man City match. Let's see what happens after Villa. Then maybe we can start discussing it. But if they start versus Villa, I know people that don't own Liverpool players, and they are worried about not having them for Villa at home. So for now, I probably wouldn't be selling. When to use triple captain, when not to use it, is game week 24 for Mane. I can tell you that was not a good time to use it. But some people are still holding this chip and wondering when is best to use it. Obviously, when you think the best captain is. My one piece of advice for this, other than we'll talk about some of the fixtures in a minute, is do not overthink this. A lot of people start looking for differentials, and should I put it on this player then because they won't be captained very well. It's just one extra score. I still believe that. It's one extra score. So if you think your player's going to get 15 points, you're going to get 15 points extra for using your triple captain. That's all there is to it. Don't worry whether it's on Salah, Fernandes, some random player that you want to put it on. It doesn't really matter. So you're running out of, obviously, weeks to use it as well. So I've looked at a few of the fixtures. If you're happy there's not going to be too much rotation, Liverpool versus Aston Villa looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to talk about Villa a little bit more when we get to captaincy later in the video. They have been defending a little bit better since the restart, but obviously this is Liverpool, so a little bit more difficult. The one thing Villa haven't been doing is scoring very many goals, so even Trent Alexander-Arnold could be a good triple captain choice in game week 33. Man United have Bournemouth if you wanted to go a little bit different. Martial, Fernandes has just been phenomenal. One blank last week, but then he scored again this week and suddenly he's back on everyone's radar. Looking a bit further ahead, in game week 34, Man United play Aston Villa. Spurs have got Bournemouth away if you wanted to go for a punt on Kane or Son. Man City got Newcastle at home. Then it's Man City versus Brighton away in Game Week 35. Man City again against Bournemouth in Game Week 36, I like the look of. Little bit of a punt, maybe Pulisic versus Norwich in Game Week 36 as well. And then Game Week 38 again, Man City play Norwich. Now, the one problem you're going to have straight away when you think of all that, if you don't want to triple captain a Man United player, then you're going to potentially have rotation. We know Man City will rotate. Klopp has said that Liverpool will rotate. Now, how much they will, we don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see. Man United players, I'd be pretty certain that Pogba, Rashford, Martial and Fernandes will keep starting every game until top 4 is out of the question. So if you're happy to put it on one of them, you're pretty much guaranteed, almost guaranteed, a starting place in the team. So maybe that's the way to do it. But you are running out of weeks. I think you just have to accept that you might pick a player that's going to get rotated. Maybe a defender will give you less of that. But even Liverpool might rotate the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I like those fixtures. If you were really, really worried, you could just wait till Game Week 38, Man City versus Norwich, and try and guess which player is going to play based on who's just played the previous few weeks, what kind of rotations happen, is there any pattern or anything like that. And then whatever Pep says, because a lot of managers do talk in the last game week about players they want to play for whatever reason it might be. So if you're really unsure about rotation, I would give it a few weeks to see if we can spot any kind of patterns, which we're going to actually come on to again in a minute. Otherwise, I think those fixtures, Man United, Man City, Liverpool over the next few weeks probably look best for me. Fernandes, Salah, Mane, Trent, Kevin De Bruyne are obviously the kind of standout picks. And then triple Man United attack. We have to talk about Man United again, even though we talked about them last week, just because of how good they were against Brighton. Sorry, not Bournemouth. It's Bournemouth at home in Game Week 33. But they just played Brighton in Game Week 32. And it was a pretty convincing win. Now, it wasn't perfect. There were still times when Brighton got some good shots in. David De Gea had to make some good saves as well. But overall, it was a really good performance. We saw Rashford and Martial blank. Now, people are panicking about them. Fernandes, who was almost a little bit forgotten last week, well, suddenly he scored 2 goals. Now everyone needs to own him again. And Greenwood's only 4.3 million. And suddenly he's now on the radar. He started the last 2 games. And in defence, Wan-Bissaka's got another assist. Now the assist was a little bit fortunate. It was just a sideways pass to Greenwood. Greenwood did all the work to score the goal. Wan-Bissaka got a little bit lucky to get that assist. But as I wrote in an article for Fantasy Football Scout, the amount of chances he's created in kind of the last half of the games we've had versus the first half of the game weeks we've had so far has kind of doubled. So he's still far away from the likes of Trent and Matt Doherty and people like that from an attacking potential, but he has improved. So if you're going to go for a defender, Wan-Bissaka definitely my defender of choice. I genuinely think now the question is not, do I have 2 or 3 Man United players? It's which 3 do I have? Great fixtures. They're playing really well. They're pretty much guaranteed starting places for most of their players. You're not concerned about rotation, at least until top 4 is not possible. Really good fixtures. You could captain them as well. I don't know what's not to like. Now, if I was going to triple up right now, it's tough. I still think Fernandes for me would be number 1. I know I probably talked a little bit different last week, but I think he would be number 1 now. We've seen him get forward. He's on penalties. He dominates set pieces. There's not really any reason not to have him. Then you've got to pick 2 more. I think Greenwood for 4.3 million, he's probably the only slight concern I have out of that kind of attacking front 5. Him, Martial, Rashford, Pogba, Fernandes, of starting every single week. Because Daniel James can play there. The only thing that I think Greenwood has in his locker that helps him a lot is he can create something out of nothing, as we saw in that Brighton game. And we are going to play defences that are probably going to try and defend deep because our fixtures are quite good. Whereas Daniel James has got a lot of pace. He's probably good for a counter-attacking team or to play against a team and counter-attack. And I just don't think we necessarily need that for the upcoming fixtures. So I think for Greenwood, you accept that he's 4.3 million and may miss the odd game. But generally, I think he's a pretty safe pick now, as much as someone can be for 4.3 million. So if you wanted to triple up on the attack, just to save some money, and again, I'm going to come on to this a little bit more, why Greenwood's such a good pick. Greenwood, Fernandes, and I still like Martial. I think Pogba is the worst one. He's not getting into the box that often and shooting, so you're relying on creating chances, which he does do quite a lot. But for me, I want goal scorers. Rashford's looked a bit rusty. He's the most expensive, and he takes up a forward slot, which is why he'd probably be slightly down the pecking order for me. So if I was tripling up on the attack, then I'd go Martial, Fernandes, Greenwood. If I was going for 1 defender, 2 attackers, I'd probably go Fernandes, Martial, and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. You could go for Greenwood instead of Martial if you wanted to, but all around, I think Fernandes is the one that stays for me. Man United looking very good. I don't really see why that would change over the coming fixtures. And I don't see too much rotation. There's just absolutely no need when the team can play like that and there's top 4 at stake. So next up, we got transferring around heavy hitters. And what I mean by this and how the question was posed was, should I do Son to a Man City midfielder this week and then swap them back the week after? Now, as a general rule, I don't do this too often. Like in the start of the season or maybe during the middle of the season, I don't do this because usually you have like a Salah or a Kevin De Bruyne or whatever it might be or whoever it might be, and they score points. Yes, they'll score higher points usually in easier games, but they can get points in harder games. And most of the time I'll see it, there's no point in transferring around those players just for 1 or 2 weeks because you're going to want them back. Maybe there's going to be injuries to other players. You need to use transfers on that. But ultimately, it's those heavy hitters that get you the big points. It's very rare that you make like a £5.5, £6 million midfielder change and all of a sudden you're getting a ton more points. So I can see why people do this. And to be honest, I'm coming around to the idea, especially for this stage of the season. We know which teams have still got stuff to play for. We know a little bit who kind of the better fixtures are now. Obviously, we've known that for most of the season, but we're getting a bit more data now from the matches we've had so far. And we may see some rotation, or we may start being able to see a pattern. If Salah gets rested, then we see him play the next game. Then he gets rested again. Then we can probably say that he's going to play the next one, and maybe the same for Mane. So maybe it is worth switching between the two if something like that happens. Same with Man City or whatever it might be. So I'm not saying that Son to a Man City player and then back again is a good or a bad idea, but I can see why people are doing it. Now, if I think about my own team, I've got a goalkeeper. Okay, it's Foster. I don't really like him or want him, but I'm not going to use a goalkeeper transfer. I've got 3 defenders with pretty good fixtures. Trent, Maguire, Doherty, which I can play every single week. When Burnley have a good fixture, I've got Taylor on the bench as well. And then I've got Fernandes and Martial, who I'm not looking at selling anytime soon. I've got Kevin De Bruyne and Salah, same thing. And then up front, I've got Calvert-Lewin and Jimenez. And again, Jimenez not being sold. Calvert-Lewin will have to wait and see. But what I'm trying to say is I've got lots of players that I'm not really bothered about changing. Could I have Matt Doherty instead of Maguire? Maybe so. Is he going to get me a ton more points? Probably not for the rest of the season, given the way the fixtures are. So I'm pretty happy to have him. So I'm not having to use transfers on those positions. So once I sort out my team this week with another Man City player, suddenly my team's kind of locked in and I'm quite happy with it. So I might start to look to move around these big hitters. And the other thing is, at this stage of the season, especially for a player like Salah or Mane that cost over 12 million, if you do transfer them out, yes, you'll have to buy them back, maybe for a slightly higher price, but their price doesn't fluctuate hugely. Salah's not going to suddenly become 13.5 million overnight and unaffordable. So I do quite like this idea. I would say, in order to do this, you probably do have to have the rest of your team set up that you're happy with for a few more game weeks at least. You don't want to have to transfer around the big hitters and also make defensive changes. And obviously, if you do get injuries, that's something you're going to have to deal with. But right now, I quite like this idea. The original question, should you do Son to a Man City midfielder and then back again? Arguably, you should just do it to a Man City midfielder and just keep them because they've got such good fixtures. Now, we might see some rotation, but their fixtures are decent. And Son was in a very wide position in the last game. We're going to have to see how he plays against Sheffield United before you can make any more feeling about how he's going to play. But ultimately, as an overall broad question, transferring heavy hitters is a tactic that I've seen people use to very good effect. And I think with only 6 game weeks to go, not many more game weeks to play for, I think it's quite a good idea. And I might do it myself once I've got my Man City players in place, and then we'll take it kind of from game week 34 onwards. Someone's asked me, budget midfielders, which is the best to go for? Now, this is where I'm going to start talking about Mason Greenwood again. So I've basically looked at 7 million and under. That's what I would consider budget. Some people would probably consider it even cheaper to be budget. But I've looked 7 million and under, and it doesn't look that appealing for a lot of reasons. So Sarr has looked pretty bad so far. So have Watford. So I wouldn't be going anywhere near him. You got Willian or Pulisic. Now, I prefer Pulisic because he's more of a goal scorer. Willian's on penalties, which is nice. But from open play, you're probably looking at more assists from him. So I quite like Pulisic. And Chelsea look okay. We'll have to see how they play this week. We'll have to see what Pulisic's injury is because he might even miss this week. So will he be back for next week? That could be a worry. So they're okay. I think Pulisic is a great option if he keeps playing and he keeps up the stats, keeps getting his shots away, and obviously keeps up his goal scoring record as well. So I do like him for kind of 7 million. That's a pretty good price. Outside of that, I'm not really sure who else you're picking. Traore, not a secure starting place at Wolves. Yes, he can get points off the bench. I wouldn't want to rely on that personally. McNeil and Ward-Prowse from Burnley and Southampton. The fixtures are both quite good from the end of the season, like 36 to 38. but ultimately they're not as good as they have looked, as good as they can be. From an FPL point of view, I wouldn't expect a huge amount of points from them. So I don't think the budget midfielder bracket looks that great. You've got Foden, could be a good option at Man City. 5.1 million, not guaranteed to start every week, might not matter. Saka, who is starting pretty much every game for Arsenal, he's at 4.7, 4.8, could be another option if you need a real budget midfielder. So Foden and Saka probably. The other option is just to switch to a 3-5-2 now and pump all your money into midfield. When you think about the strikers that people are going for right now, they could go for Jesus, Rashford. I don't think Vardy's really part of the conversation right now. So you've got two kind of 9 million plus forwards. Maybe a Jimenez around 8 million. Outside of that, people are still kind of going for a lot of cheap forwards. So Mason Greenwood's 4.3. You can stack your midfield if you go for him. Bruno, Martial, De Bruyne, Mahrez, Salah, Mane. All these great midfielders, some we've already talked about as well. You could go to a 3-5-2 rather than looking to get budget midfielders and switch to having your budget players in the attack. Is basically where I'm going with this, because Jimenez for 8 million is probably better than most of the midfielders for the same price or less. Greenwood 4.3 million is probably, if he's going to keep starting, I'm going to say he's a better option probably than Foden and Saka. Calvert-Lewin and Ings will have to wait and see with the fixtures they got coming up. But ultimately, I don't think those kind of £6-7 million forwards are any worse than the £6-7 million midfielders. But there is a lot of good midfielders from kind of 8.5-9 million upwards. So I'm probably switching to a 3-5-2, probably. And I think that might be a way to get around this kind of look for budget midfielders. But if you need someone really cheap, Foden and Saka is probably where I would go. And then Man City players that don't really have a lot to go on after last week. We've seen one extra match now, which is the FA Cup. Jesus started, Mahrez started again. That's 4 in 4. Now, I'm not expecting Mahrez to start every single game from now until the end of the season, but Sané is being sold to Bayern Munich. That's pretty much, I think it's confirmed. If not by the clubs, like there's so much media speculation, it's done now. So it looks like Mahrez, Bernardo Silva and Sterling are going to be the wingers to see more game time. It's very unlikely that Pep is going to play Sané, or at least if he comes off the bench, fair enough, but he's not going to start games. So that's one less player to worry about. So Mahrez looks like a really good option now, and I think for his price, you can't really go wrong. I still like Jesus, and I think when he's played this year, he has performed well. He hasn't looked great since restart, but I don't buy these people that think that Mahrez is going to start way more games or play way more minutes than Jesus. I just don't see that. Jesus is the only fit striker they have right now. Yes, they can play someone else as a false 9, but if you look at the amount of times Jesus has played when Aguero has been out or not started in the first 11, it's very rare, at least in the league so far, that they haven't started Jesus. I think it's only happened twice so far this year. So I still think they're good options. Kevin De Bruyne, the obvious one. And if you want to take a bit of a punt, Foden. Sterling is a great option too, but he's just very expensive. But talking about transferring out heavy hitters, after the Villa game, I think Man City's fixture, after the Villa game for Liverpool that is, I think Man City's fixtures are better than Liverpool. So you could go Salah to Sterling. That could be another way to get a Man City player into your team. Bigger differential than Salah or Mane. Is he more likely to start? Not necessarily. Obviously, Salah's still chasing the golden boot and that kind of stuff as well. But that could be an option. So there's plenty of Man City players to look forward to bring into your team. There's a few budget midfielders, but I don't really like them that much. And transferring heavy hitters, absolutely, just go for it. So I think for captaincy, the best three or the best captain come from these three fixtures: Man United versus Bournemouth, Liverpool versus Aston Villa, Southampton versus Man City. Let's just talk quickly about the other fixtures. So Spurs versus Everton. Look, maybe if you want to take a punt on Son or Kane, it could be a good option. But Everton do not concede many goals. So personally, I would not be putting my captain there. I would just be happy to own Son or Kane and hope to get some differential points. I wouldn't want to be captaining personally. Chelsea versus Watford. Watford have started very poorly, and Chelsea have looked quite good so far. Obviously, this whole thing is caveated with the fact it's coming out on Wednesday, before Wednesday's games and before Thursday's games. So who knows what might happen in those ones. Pulisic look quite good, but again, it's a little bit of a punt. And then Wolves versus Arsenal. I think a lot of people will be looking to come off Aubameyang. I don't think Nketiah is a serious captain option at this point yet. And Wolves, look, Jimenez and Doherty, really good options usually. But for me, not, especially Jimenez, not usually explosive enough. Obviously didn't score in the last game. It doesn't really matter. I think actually Arsenal at home might be a better fixture for them. But I just think the scoreline there is not going to be huge, and so I wouldn't want to put my captain there. So this is where I would be looking. Now, at first look, if I look at those fixtures, Southampton's probably the most tricky, and the fact Man City are away does worry me. What kind of rotation will there be after that Liverpool game? We don't know. But Kevin De Bruyne is always a shoo-in for captain, and given how good Mahrez has been since lockdown, you could look at him too. Liverpool versus Aston Villa on paper is probably the best fixture, but if you look at Aston Villa's defending since the break, at least from a statistical point of view, don't get me wrong, Nyland has made some mistakes and should have conceded at least probably 1 or 2 extra goals. The one where he put the ball into the net, basically, and it wasn't given, and where he threw the ball to Jota in the last game. But the amount of shots they're conceding in the box is way down on the rest of the season. So they've had some injuries. I think Engels and Gilbert have been out, so they've replaced them since lockdown. And they've had a different back four. Now, it's a very small sample size as well. And don't get me wrong, they have played Newcastle and Sheffield United, but they've also played Chelsea and Wolves now as well. And the amount of shots they've conceded in the box since lockdown is 5.5 per game. That's on average. If you look at the whole season, it's 11.8. So it's more than halved. Not saying they're suddenly world beaters or defensive masterclass and like it's an absolute fortress to play kind of Aston Villa at the moment. And Liverpool are obviously a great team. They've just won the league. I think we can say they're pretty decent. So I'd expect them to get a good few goals. But maybe Aston Villa aren't quite the whipping boys they once were. So that's the only thing that might have a slightly bit of concern, plus rotation. But if they're not going to get rotated, Liverpool looks so good against Crystal Palace. I'm sure they're going to give Man City a good game. Salah, Mane or Trent could all be really good options and arguably are the standout options this week. Man United versus Bournemouth, though, you cannot discount Man United at the moment, the way they've been playing. Who you stick it on is a difficult one. I basically captained Fernandes and had Martial when he got 21 points. This week I've swapped it. Martial captain, he's blanked, and Fernandes has scored 2 goals. So chasing points, probably not the best idea. I still think Martial is a viable captain choice. There was a couple of times where Luke Shaw pulled the ball back and Fernandes was on the end of it, but it could have been Martial. He was always central in that box. A little bit isolated in that game against Brighton, but I wouldn't expect the same thing against Bournemouth. So I think that could be a good game for him. So I like Martial. Fernandes, though, has got points from everywhere. He takes free kicks. He can't take them. He does take free kicks. He's on penalties. He got into the box more against Brighton. That's where he had his shots. Yes, he got a bit lucky with the first goal. It was a deflection. The ball had already gone out like 35 seconds before. Brighton should have had a throw-in. But at the same time, before that, he had a shot that hit the post. So he came close to even getting a hat-trick in that game. And the finish and the counter-attack for that third or the final goal was so good. So Fernandes is probably the standout. Rashford's posting some pretty good underlying stats. But when you watch him, he looks a little bit rusty. So that'll put me off a little bit. So Fernandes, if you've got him, probably Martial is number 2. But you can't look past that Liverpool game. And that's probably where my captain will be. I own Mo Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold. It'll probably be on Salah unless I get any kind of inclination. There's going to be a lot of rotation. So let me know who your captain is. And obviously let me know in the comments below about everything I've said. What do you agree, disagree with? And obviously, do you have any questions and stuff like that as well? So that's it for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, make sure to give it a like. Much appreciated as always. If you want to subscribe, just click this button here. Hit the notification bell so you know when all the other videos and live streams are live. And if you want to watch another video or check out my Patreon, the links are also just on the screen to your right. I'll catch you next time. Cheers all.